And Merrie and I chose the renal system. For the presentation, I'll present the structures of the renal system and go into detail on each of these structures. Merrie will then present some models that she created that are a visual aid in teaching the role of the kidneys, the process of urination, and the structures that involved. So for the first slide, here are the various structures that are involved. And for the first slide, or for the first structure that I'm going to touch on, will be the urethra. So the urethra is responsible for transporting urine from the bladder and ultimately releasing outside the body via micturition. There's an anatomic difference between males and females in that females have a shorter urethra, which results in a higher possibility of bacterial infections like UTIs. And the male urethra is much longer and is divided into 4 regions. The prostatic urethra, prostatic urethra, membranous urethra, and spongy urethra. Next slide is the bladder, which collects urine from both of your ureters, which I'll discuss on the next slide. But the bladder has an interior surface made of transitional epithelium, which allows the volume variations the bladder undergoes. For anatomical positioning, the bladder lies anteriorly to the uterus, and during pregnancy results in frequent urination because of this pressure that's applied. Males have a similar anatomical positioning, but have the addition of the prostate, which lies inferiorly to the bladder. Next is the ureters, which uses peristalsis to move urine towards the bladder via longitudinal and circular smooth muscles, and with their anatomy, they create a sphincter which prevents backflow. They're lined with transitional epithelium, just like the bladder, and are scattered with goblet cells, which secrete protective mucus and contain a loose adventitial layer composed of collagen and fat, which anchors the ureters between the parietal peritoneum and the posterior abdominal wall. Now, the kidneys, which are located in the retroperitoneal space between the parietal peritoneum and the posterior abdominal wall. The left kidney is located between thoracic 12 and lumbar 3 vertebrae, and left is lower due to the liver. The kidneys are composed of dense, irregular connective tissue, which allows the kidneys to hold shape. The frontal section of the kidney has an outer region, the renal cortex, and an inner called the renal medulla. For each renal cortex stems the renal columns. Each column runs into the medulla, separating each renal pyramid and papillae, creating 6 lobes. These papillae are collecting ducts that transport urine to the calyces for ultimate micturition. Now the renal hilum, which is the entrance and exit site for the structures that service the kidneys, such as renal vessels, nerves, lymphatics, and ureters. The renal arteries form directly from the descending aorta, and the renal veins return cleansed blood directly to the inferior vena cava. The renal pelvis emerges from the renal hilum and consists of the minor and major calyces. The pelvis moves urine into the ureter via peristalsis. Now the minor and major calyces, which receive urine from the papillary ducts of the renal pyramid and deliver urine to the major. From the major, the urine drains into the pelvis and then out the ureter to the bladder, which I already touched on, and the renal pelvis that I was just referring to, where the urine drains into the pelvis and then out to the ureter. Now, the renal nephrons, which is a more microscopic structure. The nephrons cleanse the blood and balance the constituents in the circulation. The afferent arterioles form high-pressure capillaries called the glomerulus, and the remainder of the nephron consists of a tubule, which is the proximal, and surrounding the glomerulus goes by the Bowman's capsule. The glomerulus and Bowman's capsule form the renal corpuscle, and once you pass to the renal corpuscle, the capillaries form the efferent arteriole, which is at the distal end of the nephron tubule, which includes peritubular capillaries and the vasa recta. Um, these networks recover solutes in water and return them back to circulation. And with keeping the focus on nephrons in tubules, I will go. Oh, sorry, this is the renal corpuscle that I was just discussing. And then the collecting duct, which participates in electrolyte and fluid balance through reabsorption and excretion, which is regulated by the hormones aldosterone and vasopressin. And then I already touched on the renal cortex initially in the beginning, but it houses the glomerulus and the convoluted tubules, which receive most of the blood flow and is mainly focused on reabsorption of the filtered material. And then finally, which I also discussed in the beginning, but the renal capsule, which is composed of dense irregular connective tissue and holds the shape and protects the kidneys. The capsule is also covered in a shock-absorbing layer of adipose tissue, which is referred to as the renal fat pad, which is covered by a tough renal fascia. And that's pretty much it. And the remainder will be for Merrie.
Hello class, this is Merrie. Just as Patrick was saying, I'm going to be talking about the role of the kidneys as well as the urinary system. So kidneys are a filter system. Their main job is to remove waste from the blood and return the clean blood back to the body. Some main functions of the kidneys are helping remove waste and excess fluid, filtering the blood, controlling the production of red blood cells, and releasing hormones that help regulate blood pressure. In this model, what you can see is the kidney, or a cross-section of the kidney. You can see the renal pyramids, which are on the flesh of the apple, and it is the blue tape on there. Within the blue tape, you can see the nephron. Each kidney contains about 1 million tiny units called the nephron. Each nephron is made up of a small filter called a glomerulus, which is attached to a tubule. Here's a clearer picture of the model that we made. And on the next slide right over here, it is a model of a nephron. The blood enters, or the blood pumped by the heart enters through the kidneys through the renal arteries, which in our model is the pink ribbon. After the blood is cleaned out and flows back, it flows back into the body through the renal veins, which is labeled in yellow. The side over here just shows a more clear picture of what we were trying to demonstrate. As blood passes through the nephron, fluid and waste products are filtered out as well. Much of the fluid is then returned to the blood, while the waste products are concentrated in any extra fluid as urine. In this model right over here, it shows the kidneys, ureters, and the bladder. After the kidneys create the urine flows through the tube called the ureter into the bladder. Urine passes from the bladder out of the body through a tube called the urethra. And that would be how the body excretes the waste products. Usually, adults eliminate about 27 to 68 fluid ounces per day based on the typical daily fluid intake, which would be around 2 liters. So, the main question would be um, why are these roles so important? So, the reason why the kidneys and the urinary system are so important is because without them, there would be no way for waste or extra fluid from the bloodstream um, and body to be removed. So, this could cause swelling in the feet or hands of the body. This would also mean that toxins would quickly build up inside the body, uh, which would make people sick much quicker. In some cases where there could be kidney failure, which means that one or both kidneys can no longer function well on their own, this could lead to fatigue, um, swelling around the hands or ankles, confusion or trouble concentrating, and an upset stomach. In order to treat kidney failure, there could be ways such as dialysis, which helps the body filter the blood since the kidneys can no longer perform that task, or there could be the option of kidney transplant as well. Although kidney failure can't be reversed, it can be prevented. So, just monitoring kidney function through lab tests like blood sugar levels or blood pressure could help you keep um, maintain your kidneys and keep them nice and healthy.